When I was in high school, every guy in class gave a handshake to every other guy in the morning. As a result, I'm sure everyone learned how to give a manly, firm handshake. Nowadays, whenever I shake another man's hand, I secretly judge his handshake, especially if it's one of those limp or floppy handshakes. Is this a thing other men also do? Do women also judge this? Please let me know, and also I'm ready for the handshake or genitals jokes. Story 1. To negate the bone-crunching handshake, extend your first finger along the inside of their wrist. They can squeeze all they want and you will feel mild discomfort at worst. Story 2. Oh my God. The limp wrist dead fish handshake is the worst. It's like I just stuck my hand in something gross. I feel like I need to wash my hand afterward. But also the guys that try way too hard. Like, dude, save that energy for your old lady. Story 3. Lots of chief financial officers I deal with are older and have softer handshakes. I ease my hold not knowing if a firm grip will hurt them, which would be a horrible first impression. My discernment for folks tends to be the amount of eye contact and smiles rather than the firmness of the handshake. Many chief executive officers I interact with have a solid grip, but chief financial officers and finance folks are my decision makers for 95% of my deals, so that's who I try to match both in appearance and approach. I won more deals after putting on a few sloppy pounds of weight than when I was really focused on my physique. Story 4. I think there's a balance where you can give a firm handshake without trying to be a weapon and excessively squeezing someone's hand. I want to put one on the chin of people who do that and say, calm down, big man. You also don't want to feel like you're putting your hand in a wet lettuce, so there is a balance. Also, where in the name of nonsense did you go to school that you shook hands every morning? Victorian times? Story 5. I generally don't care unless someone does the hand-crushing kind of handshake or if it's that overly aggressive. Let me pull you away from where you're standing handshake that a certain politician has been known to do. For the sake of appeasing social norms, it's worth learning to give a proper firm handshake since people will judge you for it. That, in turn, may affect business and work relationships. Story 6. Every time if you give me the limp fish or fingers handshake, well, I'll leave it alone. Probably going to get downvoted enough as is. That being said, there is no need to crush anyone's hand, but a full hand, firm handshake is required by men in my opinion. Story 7. I feel like there are appropriate places to give handshakes of different strengths. These days, unless you give me a dead fish of a handshake, I don't really care what you do. Story 8. I judge the strong handshakes. I just met you. Why are you squeezing my hand? Most people try to do it strongly on purpose and it feels so, look at me, I'm a big boy. I cringe every time. Story 9. I don't give firm handshakes unless I'm jokingly congratulating a friend for doing something stupid. And when I do that, I use both hands and try to shake their hand off pretty much. It's purely for comedic purposes. Otherwise, I'm not shaking your hand unless you go for one. And if you do, I'm not going for a firm handshake either because I don't care about handshakes. I care about you, and I would rather you think I have a soft handshake than temporarily fear for the safety of your hand. If that makes me some kind of effeminate sissy, which is what I'm getting from these stupid comments, then so be it. Story 10. From time to time, if it's overly firm or overly limp. But let's be honest, I am a millennial, and I feel like I am one of the few people who still uses a handshake as a physical greeting. Story 11. I don't think it matters much. I will definitely notice if it's particularly limp, but I don't really attribute it to any aspect of the person. I judge more heavily if someone does a death squeeze and it's apparent they're trying to establish they're the leader or something, an immediate red flag that the person is an unpleasant individual. Story 12. I don't do handshakes often, but when I do, yes, I remember being young and being taught to be firm. So yeah, I judge for no real reason. Now, if a woman gives me a firm handshake, I'm usually not sure how to think, run, or be excited. Story 13. I judge someone trying to crush my hand more than a limp handshake. I don't exactly judge bad handshakes, but if someone gets it right, then I do notice the good handshake. I grew up being around rugby players a lot, so 6-year-old me quickly learned how to do handshakes. Story 14. Not so much judge, but gives me a read on the man. So, every time something about it will tell me something about him. A common one is the guy who extends his hand for a handshake without looking for the other's hand. forcing the other to awkwardly look down for his. Read, gamesman. When I see it coming, I smile, look him in the eye, hold my hand out, and pump it as if I already have his hand. Adds a bit of Marx Brothers levity to the moment. Story 15, LOL. All these guys in here trying to claim the firmness of your handshake is at all indicative of masculinity or your strength as a man. Stop with this bro stuff, please. It means nothing. Like standing versus sitting to pee. Shaking hands is unpleasant. You never know if someone has arthritis or another issue that could cause pain if you squeeze too firmly. I have it, and it really hurts. People aren't always consistent with their firmness. I recently shook hands with the same guy on 2 different occasions. The first time was gentle, the second was a bit firmer. Was he suddenly more masculine and confident after the first? Did he absorb the confidence from others he had shaken hands with in that time? Compelling stuff. Story 16. Only when it's noticeably bad, especially if it's super wet. But it's more like, how do I wipe my hand in a way that's not noticeable? Never would judge the guy personally, only the handshake. Story 17. I judge a handshake every time I shake someone's hand. Sometimes strangers will mess one up simply because they are strangers. But if they use one to say goodbye and it still isn't good, I judge them. Story 18. Not much. If it's a weak handshake, I always just assume we did that thing where you accidentally grab them by the fingers or upper hand area. However, if someone tries to do the dominant over-squeeze thing, I always assume they're compensating for something or have very fragile masculinity or something like that. Story 19. Most handshakes are good. The only ones I particularly hate are dead fish, show some resolve, or the exact opposite where people stretch out the line of skin between forefinger and thumb and jab it into yours. I literally had someone do the second one an hour or so ago. Story 20. When I was in 6th grade, my math teacher wouldn't let us into the class until we shook his hand properly. He wanted to teach us etiquette for when we grew up, like looking someone in their eyes and giving them a firm handshake. I thought it was a pretty good lesson, and I still try to give good handshakes to this day when I meet new people. Story 21. All the time, if you come in with a firm handshake, that's just mutual respect. It shows I'm interested in the meeting and what you have to say, and vice versa. But an overly aggressive squeeze tells me you walk around like you have something to prove and is disrespectful. A limp handshake either tells me you don't care or are just timid. However, grab my fingers, and I'll fight your firstborn son when he turns 18. Story 22. As a woman, I judge the gentleness of the handshake. If a man shakes my hand vigorously or squeezes it a lot for a couple of seconds, I feel like I greeted a child. Also, it's a big deal breaker for me if a man does not remove gloves before a handshake, as I do. Lastly, the position matters. I usually stretch my hand with the palm facing slightly down, so if a man tries to twist it so the palm is up, I'm usually displeased because it obviously hurts. Story 23. I live in Chile, in the countryside, surrounded by farming families. Many men are cowboys, or as we call them here, arrieros. These men are very strong, having grown up working hard their entire lives. The women, by the way, are also very strong. When you shake the hand of an arriero, you can feel the thick, leathery texture of their strong hands. Despite their strength, they barely press, showing their gentleness. In the sense of great strength, not needing to show off but rather taking care of your hand, I deeply appreciate the delicacy and elegance of their handshake. It conveys cordiality and friendliness, especially through their sparkling eyes. Story 24. For the most part, there's nothing to judge. If I feel like I'm shaking hands with a flannel, then I might think, ew. And if you demonstrate your manliness by going out of your way to give a painfully strong handshake, I'll probably think, idiot. Grown men giving fist bumps in anything other than an entirely informal environment, I think, grow up. And if I go for a handshake and you go for a bro shake, as I call it, the one that includes a shoulder bump, then I just cringe a bit. Story 25. I know from my experience that often, I'm surprised and don't respond with a firm enough handshake as I'd like to. So not judging. But sometimes a limp handshake will make me have a strong opinion about that guy. Recently, I was moving into a new building and I got to meet the first neighbor. I introduced myself and offered him my hand, and he just ignored it. Never ever experienced anything like that or heard of it happening to someone else before, and I'm 43 by now. Some more experiences with him and his wife just supported that initial impression that he is overcompensating for his mighty inferiority complex. Best of all, they're devout believers. So much for compassion and love they're preaching and teaching about. Story 26. I once shook the hand of a guy who was friends with my niece, and he began tightening his grip. At first, I didn't notice that he was squeezing with all his might. It was only when he wouldn't let go of my hand, and the fact that his hand was shaking from giving it his all, that I noticed what he was doing. This dude literally smirked at me when I gave him the, "What the heck are you trying to do?" look. So yeah, the jerk of handshakes would make me judge the person pretty darn hard. Story 27. Always. However, I don't give firm handshakes because you can learn a lot about someone based off their handshake. I mix it up, let them perceive me as anything else but a threat. Story 28. My grip strength is a little ridiculous. I used to be a mechanic, and now I cut sheet metal and wrench gas pipes for a living. With wrestling and the gym as hobbies, my grip is well over 200 pounds. However, I always start with a soft handshake just to be polite. When I encounter people who try to turn a handshake into a testosterone competition, I will vice grip them until I get an audible ow. Story 29. One of my former coworkers could do that thing where you're so double-jointed that you can bend your fingers back to grab like a hand, and he shook my hand like that. I think about it a lot. Story 30. I definitely do, and my wife absolutely hates a weak, limp handshake from anyone. When I encounter a young person who shakes hands that way, I assume he had no father to teach him correctly. So, right or wrong, I will try to politely coach them. Story 31. I find it leaves a better impression to give a firm handshake. I don't really judge a limp handshake, but I think it gives the impression that you're not serious about it. You say, "Nice to meet you." Then you give the person a limp hand. That doesn't make me feel like you're serious when you say, "Nice to meet you." But grabbing the other person's hand, squeezing slightly, and shaking it 1 or 2 times at least, that does. Story 32. It's probably unfair and somewhat generational, but I'm 35, and if another man doesn't have a firm handshake, I definitely judge that moment, but not so much the person. Maybe some qualities, but not the overall person. Story 33. Woman here, I went to a school once where we practiced handshakes in middle school like we were preparing for jobs. I totally judge a handshake. If he handles my hand like I'm made out of tissue, I feel like he thinks I'm too fragile to handle and will call me a girl, even though I'm a grown woman. It's immediately off-putting in the extreme if it's a crushing handshake, because I am near certain it is intended to publicly hurt without reprisal, because who goes around crushing someone's fingers together? But a nice encompassing handshake that's firm and brief speaks of respect and actual acknowledgement and consideration. Kind of like how the Japanese make a show of handling business cards, to show that it's been a meaningful exchange. But I'm an overthinker and an overwriter. And, regardless of the situation, I'll probably immediately and thoughtlessly sanitize my hand and affect the vibe that way. Story 34. I absolutely judge you on your handshake. Limp shake equals weak personality. Firm handshake equals confidence and balanced mind. Too strong of a hold equals superiority complex. Story 35. As a woman, the only thing I hate is when you can tell the other person nearly attempts to crush the bones in your hands. It doesn't make them seem cooler, just makes my hand hurt. Story 36. Every time you have to grab their hand tightly, pull it in, make eye contact, and shake once. If you are the junior, you break first. If you are the senior, they break first. If you are equals, it's just a staring contest until one of you breaks. If you are friends or you want to be weird, your other hand can go on their upper arm. Story 37. Kind of depends. I too give the half-hearted wave and hey from time to time if I don't care about the interaction. But with people I meet on an important personal or business level, a firm handshake is a must. And yes, I scrunch my nose when a wet fish is handed to me. Story 38. Yes, every time. It's supposed to be a firm handshake. Not a limp noodle that feels like squeezing a dead octopus. But it's not an alpha move to try and squeeze the other guy's hand as hard as you can. You just come off as insecure and unprofessional. Story 39. Yes, of course. So far, I've only met one that was a perfect 10 out of 10, which makes sense. They get training for it, or so I've heard. Jimmy Carter, 10 or so years ago, flew on my flight and came around to shake everyone's hand before takeoff. I've never had such a good handshake. Story 40. I do not consciously judge them. It is more like I notice really bad ones. And it is more than just doing it wrong. Baby soft hands are what I notice most often. Story 41. I don't judge unless it's very low effort with a limp wrist, or it's the squeeze the life out of me and drag me across the room high effort handshake. I judge more on eye contact, to be honest. Handshakes, to me, are meant to be a moment of physical connection with another person, not a game of dominance. I treat it as such. Story 42. In my school and time, we greeted each other with daps. Daps don't come with judgment. Some give handshakes that fit their personality, which is mostly what sticks with me. Or it would stick with me when they tried to come off as professional, even though it wasn't a professional setting. I just assume you went to a private school or upper middle class and well off or something. So judging the overall encounter? Yes, it's good to pay attention for effective communication, but I'd never think any less of someone with an awkward, stronger or weaker or just different handshake. Or I don't care if people prefer hugs, knuckles, or whatever. It's just different and probably weren't taught the norm like you. In my opinion, most of the time, what's the norm for you isn't the norm elsewhere.